I'm going to be looking at the unholiest motherfucker of Chevrolet performance cars. The 84 through 96 Chevy Corvette. This shit stain on the name Corvette was brought out in 84, and Chevrolet bragged about, oh, this is the stiffest Corvette ever made. Now, considering that the C3 had a ride reminiscent of, say, a covered wagon, I don't know what they were bragging about. The 84 rode exactly how you'd expect, like hammered dog shit. It also came with the Crossfire injection 5.7 liter. This motor is hands down, crystal clear, unequivocal, never been so sure of anything in my life, worst pile of rat fucking shit that GM has ever squeezed out of its ass cheeks. This fucker makes the LT1 look like a classic. Getting one to run right is impossible. You'd have better luck skydiving with an umbrella. You'd have a better chance of finding aliens, the cure for cancer, and proof of the afterlife in one night. The most unforgivable thing about this turd, though, it's underpowered. If you own one, best advice, get a carburetor and be done with it.
Anyway, moving on. In 85, they softened the ride and switched to the 5.7 liter tune port injection. Now, I've talked about this motor in my 3rd Gen Camaro review. It's okay, but it's a very temperamental motor, especially on cold starts. It's a stump puller. It comes out of the hole hard and then falls flat on its face. It's what you'd call a stoplight cruiser. With mods, they can pull damn near diesel levels of torque out of their asses. Now, even with its quirks, it's still light years ahead of that shitfire injection. In 92, shit got real and they brought out the LT1. I talked about this one in my 4th Gen Camaro review. Cliff Notes version, it was designed by Satan with the intention of making GM owners miserable. Overheating, head gasket failure, rod bearing failure, OptiSpark failure, oil leaks, and generally not running where the shit are all common. Finding decent replacement parts is getting harder to do. Aftermarket parts tend to fail. Finally, in 96, they brought out the LT4 on the manual transmission cars. Basically, it's an LT1 with a better cam, higher compression, and roller rockers. Same problems apply, though. The good news is that they are far more likely to have been maintained than the LT1 counterparts. On to the transmissions. The automatics are nothing special. They do their job well enough. The manual transmissions, on the other hand, oh man, did they ever fuck that one 6 ways from Sunday. GM needed a transmission that could take the torque of the 350, but still meet fuel economy standards. Now, rather than making a 5-speed that could accomplish this, they went with the mad scientist approach and came up with the Doug Nash 4+3. They took a Super T10 4-speed out of the older GM cars and slapped on a 3-speed automatic overdrive. So in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th gear, it will automatically switch into an overdrive. Incredibly, this did work to a degree, but it was plagued with problems. Since the T10 was a great transmission, it was the overdrive unit that gave issues. 9 times out of 10, it flat refuses to work. Now, you can turn the overdrive unit off, which is going to be your best bet. Finding someone that actually knows how to rebuild one of these fuckers is next to impossible. In 89, a new ZF6 6-speed manual replaced that godforsaken Doug Nash transmission. This is a much better and stronger unit. Be warned, though, that items like clutches, flywheels, and synchro kits are getting harder and harder to find. They're also more expensive when you do find them. Now let's look at the interior. The first thing you're going to notice is that it's like getting into a bathtub thanks to the extremely high door sills. Fun fact of the day. The C4 was meant to be a T-top car, but they decided at the last minute it needed to be a target top. Since that took out a huge structural piece, they had to make the door sills much bigger to stiffen the frame back up. This was one reason that the Corvette was delayed in 83. Anyway, back on topic. The basic idea is to fall in and roll out. I'm in decent shape and it's a challenge for me. Now the next thing we want to look at is the Atari Dash. Car makers really loved the digital dash in the 80s, and none of them work anymore. The C4 is no exception. It's rare to find a working cluster, and getting a rebuilt unit ain't cheap. Look in the $350 range. One other thing to note on the early interior is the bread box. It almost looks like it should house an airbag for the passenger, but it doesn't. I think it looks totally out of place, and they do make a delete kit for it. In the 1990 interior refresh, the gauges were a combination of electronic and analog. It functions much better than the old dash did. I would have preferred them to be all analog, but it does work well enough. Something that needs to be talked about with the 90 Plus dash is that installing an aftermarket radio is a bit tricky. You have to extend the harness about 3 feet to the underside of the passenger dash, and then you have to wire in a resistor, otherwise it will piss off the gauge cluster. The seats in all interiors are comfortable, but the material rarely stands the test of time. Most of them are going to need a recover. Now, all of these cars are rattle traps. A tackle box rattles less than one of these fuckers, so get used to it. Now on to the target top. You can remove this guy and place it in the hatch area. Unfortunately, when you do this, the frame has the stiffness of a wet noodle. It's downright scary driving one of these sons of bitches with the top off. I wouldn't recommend it for anything other than a smooth highway.
Now, these cars aren't all bad. They can be had relatively cheap nowadays, and you'd be hard-pressed to find another car that performs as well in bone stock condition. In my opinion, it's the last of the true unforgiving Corvette, and one of the best looking models that GM ever put out. That said, parts for these cars have dropped to obscurity. Most things will have to be ordered from a catalog, and they love to 300 buck you to death. Some parts are flat impossible to find anymore and will require retrofitting with newer stuff. The dual mass flywheel for the ZF6 comes to mind. So if you're looking for a fun weekend toy or something that you can blast around on a track, I recommend these cars. But as a daily driver, no. I tried that, and believe me when I tell you it sucks. Thanks for watching.